Daniel was the kind of boy you noticed in a crowd. Not because he spoke loudly or demanded attention, but because his smile arrived before anything else did. At 12 years old, he had mastered the art of greeting the world with an expression of warmth, as if he carried a small sun inside him that he chose to share before anyone asked. Teachers loved him for his good manners, classmates knew him as the cheerful one, and even strangers often found themselves smiling back when they crossed paths with him. But behind that brightness lay a weight few could see. At home, the walls often felt heavy. His mother worked 2 jobs and returned late at night, carrying exhaustion in her every step. Their conversations were short, sometimes no more than a reminder to eat or a gentle touch on his shoulder before she drifted to bed. Daniel didn't blame her. He understood she carried responsibilities far beyond his years, but still, the silence lingered, and silence has a way of pressing into a child's heart. To protect himself, Daniel learned early that a smile could shield him, soften the edges of loneliness, and keep people from asking too many questions. In school, his smile became his armor. When classmates teased him for being too quiet, he smiled. When he stumbled in gym class and others laughed, he smiled. Even when he felt the sting of not being invited to birthday parties or groups, he smiled first, as though to convince himself that joy was his choice, not something others could deny him. Yet in the quiet of his room, when the light dimmed and the world no longer watched, Daniel often stared at the ceiling, wondering if his smile truly belonged to him. It felt borrowed at times, like clothing that didn't quite fit but was still necessary to wear. He longed for someone who might look past it, someone who would notice that beneath the cheerful curve of his lips lived a boy who feared being forgotten. It was during those restless evenings that he would sometimes glance outside his window and see Mr. Harris, the elderly neighbor across the street. The old man sat almost every afternoon on his porch, his posture calm, his eyes thoughtful, like someone who had already seen the world reveal both its cruelty and its grace. Daniel didn't know then that this neighbor would soon become the one person who dared to look deeper, the one who would slowly unravel the quiet mystery of the boy who always chose to smile first. Mr. Harris had a way of sitting still that made time seem slower. His old wooden chair creaked whenever he leaned back, and a chipped mug of tea was never far from his hand. For weeks, Daniel only watched him from a distance, curious but unsure if the man would welcome company. One afternoon, on his walk home from school, Daniel saw Mr. Harris's wave. It was not just a casual wave, it was slow, deliberate, as though inviting him to come closer. Daniel hesitated, then smiled, of course, before stepping onto the porch. They talked about simple things at first: the weather, the sound of birds, how school was going. Daniel gave short answers, always with that familiar smile. But Mr. Harris studied him with gentle eyes that seemed to notice what others missed. After a pause, he said softly, "You smile a lot, Daniel. More than most kids your age." Daniel only shrugged, widening his grin as if to prove the observation true. The old man didn't press him further, yet Daniel felt as though his armor had been touched for the first time. As days passed, their conversations grew longer. Daniel would sit on the porch steps, sharing stories about classmates, about the games he played alone, and sometimes about his mother's long hours. Mr. Harris listened more than he spoke, his presence steady like the oak tree beside the house. Then, one late afternoon, he asked, "Do you ever feel tired of smiling?" Daniel froze. No one had ever asked him that. The question sat heavy in the air. He wanted to say no, to laugh it off, but something in Mr. Harris's voice felt safe. Slowly, Daniel whispered, "Sometimes." The old man nodded, as though he had expected that answer. "You know, strength isn't always in smiling," he said. "Sometimes, strength is in letting someone see your tears." Daniel's chest tightened. No one had ever told him that before. All his life, he thought smiling was proof that he was strong, that he could handle loneliness and teasing. But here was someone suggesting that honesty might be just as powerful. In the evenings that followed, Daniel thought about those words. He noticed how, at school, he smiled even when kids mocked him. He realized he never gave anyone the chance to see the sadness behind his grin. His smile had been his shield, but maybe it had also built a wall that kept people from truly knowing him. For the first time, Daniel wondered if smiling first was always the right choice, or if sometimes letting the truth show could bring him closer to others in a way he had never known. The next week at school, Daniel found himself sitting beside a classmate named Ethan, who had been absent for days. Rumors spread that Ethan was sick, though no one seemed to know how serious it was. When he returned, his skin looked pale and his body fragile, yet his seat remained as empty of friends as ever. During recess, Daniel noticed him sitting alone, staring at the ground. Something in that sight tugged at him. His first instinct was to walk over with a smile, the same way he always approached people. But he remembered Mr. Harris's words. Strength is not only in smiling, sometimes it is in letting others see the truth. So instead of hiding behind cheer, Daniel sat beside Ethan in silence. He let the quiet stretch until Ethan finally whispered, "I don't feel like myself anymore." His voice cracked, and Daniel felt the heaviness in it. Normally, Daniel would have smiled and said something light, but this time, he lowered his eyes and answered softly, "I know what that feels like. I smile a lot, but sometimes I'm just tired inside." Ethan glanced at him, surprised. It was the first time Daniel had spoken of his own weariness. That small act of honesty became a bridge, and for the first time, his smile when it came was not just a mask. It was an offering rooted in shared understanding. The days that followed tested Daniel further. Some classmates continued teasing him for his endless optimism, but instead of covering it with another grin, he allowed himself to admit, "That hurts." His voice trembled, yet he noticed something shift. He realized his vulnerability did not make him weaker. It gave his smile a new depth that people could trust. When Daniel returned to Mr. Harris's porch, he shared what had happened. The old man nodded with quiet pride. "You see, your smile is a gift, but it was never meant to hide you. It was meant to reveal your kindness, your truth, all of it." Daniel felt something ease inside him. His smile carried the weight of honesty and the warmth of courage. It told people, "I am here, not perfect, but real." And in that simple change, the boy who always smiled first no longer felt forgotten. His light was no longer just for others, it was also for himself. There is something unforgettable about the way a simple smile can hold both joy and sorrow at once. Daniel's story reminds us that true strength is not about pretending to be unshaken, but about allowing others to see us as we are: fragile, hopeful, human. His journey shows that when we carry honesty within our smile, it becomes more than an expression. It becomes a light that guides both ourselves and those around us. If this story touched you, take a moment to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more heartfelt stories.